The Rangers defeat the Hurricanes and book their ticket into the Eastern Conference Final. What implications does this have on the Toronto Maple Leafs? We'll discuss that and more here today on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Welcome into today's it's Friday. It's a Friday, May 17th episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast. Dave and I just watched the New York Rangers rally down 3-1, come back and beat the Carolina Hurricanes 5-3 and advance to the Eastern Conference Finals. Chris Kreider, a natural hat trick in the third period. He was an absolute beast. He basically said, I don't feel like playing a game 7, so I'm just going to end this thing in 6. And, he did just that. Rangers beating the Hurricanes in 6 games. Did you expect that to happen here, Dave?
I didn't expect. I thought the Hurricanes were done a lot earlier in the series.
But at the start of the series, who did you have? I don't remember.
I think I had the Rangers.
Yeah, I have it Rangers, Dallas in the Cup final. So I know I had the Rangers winning this one. I don't remember if I said 6 or 7. I probably said 6 or 7 to be fair. But dude, like the Rangers, that's a good team. That's a really, really talented squad. But Chris Kreider with a natural hat trick in game number 6 tonight. And what gets me excited, I guess, as a Leaf fan, is I've often heard people say that Matthew Knies could be like a Chris Kreider type of player. Like when you hear a lot of these draft pundits and, guys on TSN and Sportsnet and whatnot, and they're talking about like, oh, Matthew Knies could be this player. If he should be watching film or tape of this guy to learn how to play his position based on his size and skill level. And the guy who always gets brought up is Chris Kreider. Like, and that's who people believe if Knies reaches, his potential, he could get into that echelon of the Chris Kreiders, a former 50-goal scorer, somebody who can score 3 goals in a game, in a period, in a Stanley Cup playoff game, a series clinching game at that. That's got to get you pretty excited when you watch, a player go off like that and just think in the back of your mind, Matthew Knies could become that someday.
Well, that's the exciting part, and that's the development, right? Like Chris Kreider, I've always been a fan of Chris Kreider just because he knows what his game is and he works it to perfection, and he is one of the tougher players to defend. He is so big. He gets in front of the net. He says, "This is my zone."
So strong on his skates.
And like, let's not forget, like he's been in the league since I think like early 2010s, like 2012 or 2013.
Yeah.
He just scored his first 50-goal season a few years ago. And like, he's a late bloomer, but he's like in the regard, like he's gone better with age, right?
Yes.
Like he is
like fine wine in that regard.
He has found ways to reshape his game to make himself even much more, even a better version of himself. And like, I'm looking back at the stats. When he scored the 52 goals, 26 of those came on the power play. And it was all in that, like, you know where he's going to be. He's the chip master too. Like, just such a good player.
So good in around the net. So good. So, yes, I think like you watch a game like that and it makes you kind of smile and you're like, man, if Knies can reach that potential that people have on him, like the player comparable of Chris Kreider, it does make you quite excited for what he could develop into if he continues on the trajectory. And he showed a lot of, a lot of those skills in the playoffs. He was one of the Maple Leafs best players in this postseason. And that's often been a soft spot, I guess we'll say, in the Leafs roster, is finding guys who could get it done in the postseason. But Matthew Knies, like last year, prior to getting injured in that Florida series, was great. Like he surprised a lot of us, and he was only like a handful of games into the NHL. I think he played the last 3 games of the regular season, and then hopped right into the playoffs. Like he'd only played a handful of games, and he looked like he belonged at that point. And then this year, his second go at it in the Stanley Cup playoffs, he was one of the Leafs' best players. He was really, really solid. On both ends of the ice, but super, super strong on pucks, and he was a puck hound. He's got a really good active stick to keep pucks alive and play alive in the offensive zone. So you saw some of those skill sets kind of flash, we'll call it, in the playoffs this year. But once that consistency comes, maybe that Chris Kreider's that's the level of production that Matthew Knies can get to. And if that's the case, the Leafs got a good one. The Leafs got a good one. So it's 2 days in a row we've talked up, Leafs young prospects, and Easton Cowan, the Cowboy, who, is coming off of an MVP winning season, both in the OHL playoffs and in the regular season, won the OHL championship yesterday, 15 points in 4 games in the OHL final, so he's somebody who scores come playoff time, who produces come playoff time. So if Matthew Knies can get there too, at least for years it was all Matthews, Marner, Nylander. Those guys gotta do it for Toronto because no one else can. Well, there's a little secondary group of young kids who are coming up after them now that could pick up a bit of the slack, and that's got to make you feel good if you're a Leaf fan.
Well, and it also just reinforces why you need to think twice when you move draft picks, right? Like we always said, they're all in, they're all in, they're all in. But sometimes you can find these players that, Matthew Knies, he didn't come right away, but it didn't take him that long for him to become an option at the NHL level. And these are younger, cheaper contracts. You don't have to, you're not waiting for like a 4th or 5th round pick. They're like, you're better off getting those, value from the higher draft picks, like your 1st and 2nd rounders. So when you're trading them for a rental, you have to really weigh, does it make sense? I understand that the Leafs are not exactly picking, 15th every year, or they're not picking high up, but these are still quality players. If you get them in the right draft, you get the right player and your scouts do their job. This is why I think the Leafs were less likely to move picks this year, because their first rounder, because they need to start supplanting these younger players, their older aging out players with younger players.
Right. I'm going to clip this and I'm going to play this for you next February, when we talk about the trade deadline, and you're going to sit here, trade the first round pick, trade future picks, bring in this guy, bring in that guy. You're going to become the pick trading master when we start to do, our deep dive into the deadline. Now you watch, you're going to start squawking off, and I'm going to say, remember what you said back in May, Dave, when you remembered what draft picks can turn into, young prospects. Let's play that clip before we start trading everything away. Just kidding. Although, that conversation is going to come at some point. And we probably will be like, oh yeah, sure, trade that guy for a 1st round pick. And it is the interesting conversation. Like, realistically, when you weigh the pros and cons, like, I always say I'm more of a fan of parades over prospects. And if that player puts you in a position to potentially have a parade in a few months, it's worthwhile giving up that draft pick to me. I've always kind of been that way, and I still will be, as long as the team is in like a win now cup mode, cup window. So it's a catch-22. You want to move those picks because they have value to bring in players to help you win now, but at the same time, making those draft picks, using those selections, developing them, they become good players that will be in your system and you'll have under control for 5, 6, 7 years. So, it's sometimes patience pays off, like they do with Nyes and looks like could happen with Easton Cowan. But sometimes you get a little overzealous and you're like, yeah, we could add a Ryan O'Reilly. We could add a Jake McCabe. Sometimes you add a Nick Foligno and it doesn't work out too. So it's a conversation as old as time and a debate that's old as time, whether or not you trade out draft picks for win now. And every team's a different position at the end of the day. And who knows where they're going to be, come next February. But I'm sure we'll have that discussion. Hopefully both Nyes and Easton Cowan are tearing it up at that point for the Maple Leafs. So let's take a quick break. Let's talk about the implications of the Rangers eliminating the Carolina Hurricanes and what that could mean for the Toronto Maple Leafs and their head coaching search. That's coming up next on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NHL, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Price on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to puck drop. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets, and Game Time has the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA or NHL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you. Locked On Leafs, the daily Maple Leaf centered podcast. We've got episodes coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, all throughout the rest of the season. And we'll even be giving you episodes through the off season. It's 365 Leafs content here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. So make sure you're locked in, tuned in, and subscribed to the podcast wherever you get them. Or also up on YouTube for that daily dose of Maple Leafs content. Speaking of Maple Leafs content, what we do best, turning, other storylines and make them about the Maple Leafs, which is what we're about to do here. The Rangers eliminating the Carolina Hurricanes. New York advances into the third round of the playoffs, into the Eastern Conference Finals. They'll wait one of Boston or Florida to meet them there. As for the Carolina Hurricanes, well, they joined Toronto out on the golf course, and the Carolina Hurricane season comes to an end, and now all eyes will be on Rod Brind'Amour, who has his contract is expiring at the end of the season here, and there's a lot of people that think potentially the Leafs, the reason why they haven't made a decision fully yet and completely committed to a head coach to this point, as of this recording, things could change in the morning, is because they may have been waiting to at least talk with Rod Brind'Amour, and they had to obviously wait until after the Hurricanes got eliminated and their season was over. Do you anticipate that conversation to happen? And when would you expect that conversation to happen? Can it happen in the next 24 hours? I don't know.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's the thing, is the timing of this. That's why I wanted the Rangers to finish this off earlier, get the clock started a little bit quicker here, right? And so with Rod Brind'Amour, I don't know if how much you followed the whole contract situation when it was being reported that there was I guess not a lot of progress with the talks, and they had to play the good old I want to be here, we'll sort it all out. Then you see Seattle gasses their coach. Ron Francis has a little bit of history with Rod Brind'Amour. I was saying, if I'm Carolina, if you really want to get this, if you want to keep Brind'Amour, you better have gotten that contract done beforehand. I can't see him staying, and I think he's going to want I guess his contract would technically be over at the end of the season.
Yeah, so it certainly wouldn't be done like today, like
No,
right?
it's not done like 24 hours after losing.
But you could seek permission to speak with Rod Brind'Amour. It all depends if I guess the Hurricanes allow it. Like that was
Yeah.
kind of the situation last year with the Leafs, right? Technically, the
Brad Treliving was
contract
still
didn't
under. Yeah.
right. So like yeah, like what Brad Treliving was still under contract, and they had to seek permission essentially for him to go and to be a part of the Maple Leafs brass up until the contract officially expired on, I guess, July 1st or whatever it was, which is why he was technically not able to be there for the first pick for the Maple Leafs, which ended up being Easton Cowan anyways, so it didn't really matter, I guess, when all said and done. I'm not sure how that would work out for coaches though. And if Tom Dundon, the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, wants as much time as possible to try and convince Rod to stay, um, he probably wouldn't want Brind'Amour hearing other teams and hearing, the amount of money that other teams are willing to throw at him, right? So, we keep talking about how, the Maple Leafs are waiting on the Hurricanes possibly to get eliminated, talk to Rod Brind'Amour, but I'm not even sure they're going to be able to really talk to him in time if the plan is to make a decision by quote end of week, which is what we keep hearing from all the insiders.
Yeah. Yeah, the timing of this is really not great in terms of maybe on what the Leafs timeline is. I guess maybe that's why we haven't heard anything concrete yet, right? Like Berube did go and talk to the Jets, so we know that it wasn't
Virtual.
like a virtual talk.
Right?
So
He came to Toronto. I'm just saying. He came
no,
to
that's fair.
Toronto, but did not board a flight to go to Winnipeg. He said, thanks. We'll just do a quick Zoom instead.
Yeah, it sounds like the
Ooh.
Jets are considering an internal hire as
Yeah,
well.
they'll probably end up going with Scott O'Neill.
Yeah, we'll give our boy Nick Alberga the shout out there because I think he was putting that out there. So for Berube, the other thing is he doesn't want to wait around either. Like if he feels like he could kind of force the Leafs' hand a little bit here too, and be like a bunch of other teams that I've been potentially talking to. I don't know how many he's exactly talked to. We know the Devils. Devils are kind of shifting their plan with Keefe being available, right? So if you're Berube, you want to get this done as soon as possible because you don't want options to, the teams you thought you had kind of your pick of the litter. Now you add Brind'Amour to the mix potentially, or any other coach that. Well, I guess Brind'Amour. I don't expect any other coaches at this point to be let go.
Probably
But like
not.
if you're Berube, this is a complication for you too, and you probably are going to want to put a little bit of heat on the other teams so you're getting the team that you want to go to.
Well, there's only, X amount of deck chairs that are out there, right?
Yeah.
So like if the Leafs are gonna try and wait as long as they can to try and see if they can seek permission to speak to Brind'Amour, if Brind'Amour is going to even be available, or is he gonna resign in Carolina? Like if they want to know, and while they're waiting, Berube waits too. I mean, some of these other positions could end up getting filled, right? Keith could
Yep.
end up in LA, or Keith could end up in New Jersey. LA could end up getting Hiller. Sounds like the Jets probably are going to be retaining Arneal. And all of a sudden, it's like, okay, if they, go with Brind'Amour, let's say the Leafs do, now it's like, all right, there's only like two other teams that, I could even sign with that
Yep.
have coaching vacancies. Could be Carolina, I guess, could go to Carolina, or potentially Seattle, the other team that has a vacancy, or San Jose if he really wanted to, although I don't see him as a San Jose landing spot. That doesn't fit for me. So yeah, it's for Berube. Although if he really wants Toronto, he kind of is going to have to wait, or else he.
He has to be careful too
It,
that he doesn't put the Leafs in a position like, well, is it going to be me or is it going to be someone else? You got to make a decision.
well, yeah, I mean, let's come back and talk about that
Yeah.
actually, because I don't know if that is as bad of a deal for Berube. So why don't we come back and discuss that, and maybe we could have the debate. Brind'Amour or Berube? Who would you rather have as the next head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs? We'll do that on the other side. This is the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because at eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the price you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you. We are the hosts here at Locked On Leafs, a daily Maple Leafs centric podcast. And just before we stepped aside to hear word from our sponsors, we were kind of talking about the options that the Maple Leafs have when it comes to the head coaching search. And it seems like Craig Berube, as of now, is at the top of their wants list. He's the front runner. That is being reported by many insiders. However, I wonder how much that could possibly change now that the Carolina Hurricanes are eliminated, and if Rod Brind'Amour becomes available to speak with. Again, we don't actually know if the Hurricanes are going to be willing to allow him to talk to other teams. They'll probably want to have, a little bit to try and hammer out a contract extension. So it does get pretty interesting where it's okay. Do we just go ahead and name Berube as head coach and just pass on Brind'Amour, I guess, and not risk losing Berube and not having Brind'Amour if we decide to wait? Or could they potentially just, sit there and say, all right, let's just hire Craig Berube and that'll be it? Or do they wait for Brind'Amour? So there's a few options there, but I am curious, Dave, like you were kind of bringing it up, Berube, it wouldn't be smart for him to basically say, poop or get off the pot in a way for him talking to the Maple Leafs, where it's like, either bring me in, sign me as the head coach, or I got to move on here because, at some point these deck chairs are all going to start falling down and there's not going to be many options for me. I don't know if that would be as bad of a move as you think it would. I think that, he actually has a lot of leverage in that regard. Do you not believe so?
I think so.
Why do you think it would not behoove him to give them an ultimatum?
Well, I mean, teams that want to look at every particular option available, you got to be careful of how hard you want to play your hand, right? If Berube knows that the Leafs really like him, and they really want to but they want to kind of get the Brind'Amour option, he shouldn't go too hard and say, well, I can't wait forever for you guys to make a decision, right? Because in a way, you want to put a little bit of pressure on them to make that definitive. If the Leafs really want Berube, if Berube's their guy, it wouldn't be the worst. I know it wouldn't be the worst thing to put pressure on, but at the same time, they could be like, well, we kind of want to see what the other guy's like, right? He may blow our socks off with a potential interview. I remember when Babcock, pretty much almost ready to go to Buffalo, and at least came out of nowhere and be like, oh yeah, we actually want you.
Yeah, well, they were getting ready to sign
Guy Boucher
to be their next head coach, and all of a sudden Babcock was like, I'm going to come to Toronto, and they're like, oh, all righty then. Sign on the dotted line. Here you go.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be kind of a similar situation, I guess, if Brind'Amour, a very highly coveted head coach, did, come to Toronto. It definitely would be a lot more different than the last guy who was here, Sheldon Keefe, who came from the Marlies, and there was really no NHL experience there. Brind'Amour's an experienced coach. So is Berube. I mean, they're both extremely experienced. Same with Todd McClellan, who also belongs in this conversation. He has interviewed with the team as well. We shouldn't forget about him. But it does seem like at this point, Berube's the front runner, and then they want to just wait and see potentially if Brind'Amour could be an option as well. But if you were given the option, let's say you were Brad Treliving, and both Brind'Amour and Berube came up to you and said, all right, I'm willing to be the head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs, who'd you pick as the head coach of this team?
I would do Brind'Amour.
Brind'Amour's never won a championship. Berube's got championship pedigree. Like
he has the one championship. Yes.
So what were you about to say?
Hold on.
Sorry. Say that again, Mr. Pelly. Say it again, Mr. Pelly.
He's got the one championship. And I
Where?
know the Leafs don't. In St. Louis.
Oh, so I thought you were talking about Brind'Amour.
No. I'm talking about Berube.
Oh, yeah. He's got a championship.
Yeah. He's got the Brind'Amour doesn't. But if you look at what Brind'Amour has been able to do with that Carolina Hurricanes team, like, they don't have a superstar really on that team. They got a good team, but they don't have no one's putting anyone on the Hurricanes as like top 5, top 10 in the league.
Well, there's only like 3 teams that have that realistically.
Well,
so that's
and here's the thing, right?
But
and
is Jacob Slavin not the best defensive defenseman in the league?
Yeah, I would say he's up there.
I mean,
but again, they don't have the other stuff that you kind of need. They haven't had the goaltending to be like when St. Louis went on their run. Jordan Binnington went on a bender like I've never seen a goaltender go on before, and unfortunately, not surprisingly, he hasn't been able to really replicate that. And I think that was part of the reason why Berube got the gas.
Yeah. Right, so I disagree with your point. I don't think it's they never got the goaltending. I think it's the flaws in Carolina through the playoffs are eerily similar to the flaws in Toronto.
True.
They have not been able to score the big goals. That to me, I think that's been the issue. And that's why they brought in Evgeny Kuznetsov. It's why they brought in Jake Gensel, thinking, okay, this is the guy who can score us a big goal when we need it in the playoffs, something that we haven't really had. And that's the only thing that kind of worries me when I look at Brind'Amour, and I'm like,
true.
He never found a way to get the Hurricanes over the hump. Like, yes, they've won rounds and they've gone to like conference championships, but
they've been close. They've been knocking on the door.
Yes, they've been a lot closer than Toronto. We can at least say that. I think. Did they bring?
I think that
7 games the one year, maybe 6 games.
I think they lost to Boston in 7 one year, didn't they?
Maybe that's what it was. But he's never won, right? Or gotten to a cup final. He's never broken down that door where Berube has. And I think that says something. Like that gives him, that makes him an inch or two taller when he walks through that door. That allows him to say, hey, this is what we did when we won a championship. If you guys want to win one as well, buy in. Because it took a complete buy-in to do that. Brind'Amour can't really walk in and say that. Is he a good coach? Absolutely. Has he gotten a lot out of a little bit? Can he does he get every little bit of juice out of the lemons that he's squeezing out in Carolina? Absolutely he has.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't have the same cachet. He's not a Stanley Cup winning coach like Craig Berube is. So although I think they still, and this isn't necessarily what I would choose, but I still think that you're right, they do want to at least have a chat with Brind'Amour and see what's up. I wonder if they still would end up going with why am I blanking on his name? What the hell is his name?
With Berube?
Berube. Yeah. I'm like, I've said it like 12 times the last 20 minutes. I still think they go with Berube as the guy, even regardless. I don't know. I think that's possible. I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, to be honest, but it wouldn't shock me even if they had a chance to talk to Brind'Amour, they still go Berube.
Yeah, I think so.
The winning pedigree. And if you recall what Keith Pelly talked about What did he say like a dozen times in his introductory press conference?
We want to win.
We want to win.
We need to
That's
win.
something Berube's done and Brind'Amour hasn't. Earlier, when you were saying he has won, I thought you were referring to Brind'Amour, and I thought you were going to tell me about when he won a Stanley Cup as a player with the
No,
Hurricanes.
no, because we
I was going
already
to say,
gone down
hold
that
on
road
there.
with Brendan Shanahan.
Yeah, that's how I was like, hold on there, Keith Pelly.
Yeah.
That's what I meant by that, by the way.
Yeah, I figured that after the fact.
Yeah.
But I think, again, if you want to really do a shit like Brendan, I know people talk about Berube being a hard ass. Brind'Amour is not exactly shy, doesn't shy away from his players either. He pushes his players, right? Like the guy is called Rod the Bod because he literally is at the same peak fitness as his players.
Yeah,
And
I think
pushes
it's a
them.
bit. I think it's different, right? Like
Right.
Brind'Amour, I think is almost like monkey see, monkey do kind of coach, where he's like, I give 110%, so you should give 110%. Whereas I think you look at Berube and he's like, accountability is number one for that guy. So it's like it's a little different, like the styles. But to your point, yeah, it's Brind'Amour is not I don't know who's a player coach that's like a really well known player coach. He's not Gabby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he ain't no Gabby. You know what I mean?
No, that's fair, right? I mean, I do think like look, if they decide ultimately this week it's going to be Berube, I wouldn't be like, oh, how could they miss out on Brind'Amour? I'm like not at that low. I just think like Brind'Amour, I've liked what he has done in Carolina so much that I think if you give him an opportunity to work with guys like Matthews, Nylander, it could be, and he could attract a lot of players too potentially, right?
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Hey, Brett Pesce, you've done wonders alongside Rod Brind'Amour. You want to follow him to Toronto? I bet there's a lot of Leaf fans that wouldn't mind having Brett Pesce in the fold.
Exactly.
Right? So, yeah, it'll be interesting. Like I said, the latest report is that the Leafs would like to have an answer on their coach sooner rather than later. There were reports earlier in the week that suggested that by the end of the week we could have an answer, and well, we're basically at the end of the week. But I don't know if Carolina prolonging the series maybe pushed that a little bit further, kick the can down the road a couple more days. I don't know. I guess we'll find out if we hear anything about it later today. But as of now, no news on the next head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Before we sign off for the day, Dave, it was a bit of a tough news day in the Canadian sports scene, the broadcast scene in particular. Darren Dutchyshen, a fellow TSN colleague of mine and somebody who I know you grew up definitely watching on the the Sports Center loop, and many young and old Canadians all around the country grew up watching Darren Dutchyshen. He passed yesterday after I think it was a 4-year battle with cancer. Really tough news. I've had the pleasure of being able to meet Dutchy at multiple occasions throughout our time at TSN, and multiple great stop and chats, and it's a sad day, and I know he's going to be very much missed in TSN headquarters, and everybody who looked forward to watching his broadcasts on Sports Center to this very day. He meant a lot. He's an icon in the broadcast world. He was a larger than life personality, and what I can tell you from personal experience is he's the exact same person in real life than he is on TV, and he was just such a genuine human being who always, no matter who you were, was willing to engage in a quick little stop and chat and talk sports, talk Leafs, talk Raptors, CFL, football. Didn't matter what it was, whatever was going on, he'd find out what your interests were, and he'd have a quick conversation with you, whether you were, the nighttime, update person, or you were working the Chiron operator, or if you were, behind the scenes, or you were high up and you were the president of the company, treat everyone the same too, which I always respected about Darren Dutchyshen. So I just wanted to quickly, give our condolences to the Dutchyshen family and the TSN family that obviously has taken the news pretty hard. Yeah, I'm gonna miss him. He was always a lot of fun, ball of energy, buzzing around TSN headquarters, and it's not gonna be the same without him, Dave. It's not gonna be the same. So
Yeah.
rest in
Uh,
peace.
Yeah, obviously I haven't had a chance to meet him on a day-to-day basis like you, but I had the pleasure of seeing him a couple of times. And yeah, you're truly right. The way he is on the broadcast is the way he is in person. I think that's a unique trait that you don't usually see a whole lot in this industry. And yeah, I always appreciated when he would do, like those top 10 lists or anything like that. He just did it in such a unique and fun way. He
He
made
always had his own little flair, right?
yeah,
Always added a little
so
flair.
much
Those
fun.
one-liners off the cuff.
It was so much fun, and like he made it fun, and he knew that was that was his style. He leaned into it, and everyone appreciated it. And when I saw the news, like it hit, and I had to like take a second because like we know what he was going through, the battle he was going through, and just the shock of it. So yeah, I obviously condolences to everyone at TSN, his family, because I know this is hard. I was watching some of the clips that they were doing for the tributes. That's like so tough when you work with someone for that long, and like he's a part of your everyday life, even if you didn't know him.
Yeah.
I think that's what makes like his legacy truly special, is that even people who didn't know him felt like they knew him.
Right. Right. And I do recommend that people go and watch those specials that TSM put out. They put out I think it was an hour-long special. They're just kind of sharing stories of their interactions with Darren Dutchyshen. And Dutchy was a one of a kind, man. Like, just listening to some of the stories that were being told. James Duthie tells a few, and it had me laughing and smiling, and um, just goes to show how great of a man he was. That people, even now that he's gone, he's still putting smile on people's faces, and still allowing us to laugh because of some of the silly things he did or said. While he was still here. Yeah, some tough news today, and our condolences go out to his family. All right, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms, including up on YouTube. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Enjoy your weekend, ladies and gentlemen. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.